Welcome to Cortex Labs, the podcast where innovation meets conversation. I'm your host, Matthew Smith, the founder of Cortex Labs, an AI development company at the forefront of cutting edge technology. Join me as we dive into insightful discussions with tech pioneers, gaining valuable insights to keep you informed about the ever evolving industry. It's not just about exploration of tech, it's about forging meaningful connections and delivering real value to our audience. Our guest today is Dr. Chow, a global healthcare leader in enterprise intelligent automation. Formerly, he served as the medical director for digital medicine at a leading biotech firm and held the position of chief innovation officer for a federal health IT service company. With over two decades of clinical practice and a UC Berkeley MBA valedictorian, Dr. Chow is a strategic thinker and international speaker on healthcare, IT, telehealth, and big data. As a founder and advisor for techstartups, he's also a co-inventor of ultra-fast network storage technology with 3 US patents. Join us as we explore Dr. Chow's insights into digital transformation, innovation, and the future of healthcare. It's a pleasure. Welcome, Dr. Chow. How you doing?
Thank you, Matthew. I don't know who the introduction is for, but it sounds great.
You, of course, man. You've been awesome, man. So I'm happy to have you here. We talked previously, and unfortunately, the audio that we used was messed up. So I'm glad we were able to run it back a second and get you on here. So, how has your experience as the former medical director for digital medicine shaped your views on innovation in healthcare?
Yeah, innovation is a very interesting thing in healthcare and other regulated industries because there's a lot of risk aversity. You know, one of the main concerns of healthcare organizations is to reduce and to mitigate risk. And that risk can come, the stakes are very high. The risk is in terms of patient safety, patient outcome, in terms of regulatory compliance, in terms of security, cybersecurity, all kinds of things. So as I was working at Kaiser and looked at literally hundreds and hundreds of health tech startups, it started to shape my ideas on how innovation in healthcare works. And a lot of it is based on, most of the attention is given to startups to solve near-term problems, such as, claim denials and things like that. But increasingly, especially after COVID, I'm seeing that healthcare organizations are going higher. That is, they're thinking about digital transformation for once, and because COVID really was the motivator, the sort of Kickstarter for transformation in healthcare. Mm-hmm. And it forced people to do things like telemedicine and digital health. And they found out it was not bad. It could work. Yeah. And the main enabler of that was that the government allowed funding for that. So digital health got a big boost from COVID. Mm-hmm. And from sort of forced proof of concept exercises by various healthcare organizations. So I think that remote care, remote monitoring, digital health using AI, those kind of things are going to stay, but maybe we'll go back to a little bit towards the in-person care as well, which was not possible during COVID. So, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I have an Oura ring, so I usually keep track of all my analysis and make sure I'm on point with that. I've even seen some crazy innovations recently where I think you're mailed some type of scan, and it scans your whole body and gives you analysis based on AI. So where do you think AI plays a part within the healthcare?
I think AI and in particular, since the end of November last year, Gen AI, generative AI, really has been around a long time. Even Gen AI has been around a long time, but it's like the robot vacuum cleaner. It's not until it really became something you could look at and actually was doing something useful that people started going, hey, I could see using a robot. It's not just a hobby, right? I could see using it, automatic, auto driving cars, all robots, things like that. So I think the same thing is happening with AI. AI was around, but it was an academic theory until November,
Okay.
when OpenAI opened its beta test to everybody. Millions. I think it was the fastest upload trajectory in history. I think
Yeah. Millions.
something like 100 million uploaded in 1 week, something like that.
Wow.
Anyway, it was brilliant because now the layperson, the doctor, the nurse in healthcare, the lab tech could play with it, and they started to see that it could really help. I mean, it's one of the first technologies that could really help with their mundane electronic paperwork, their chores that they have to do to reduce the burnout and free them up for family time, things like that. And so it got a lot of excitement, and all the conferences I went to, that was the major and still is the major topic of discussion.
Mhm.
So AI has a bright future, and Gen AI is like that robotic vacuum cleaner. It's sort of opened everybody's eyes to the possibility of AI. And looking at AI and Gen AI in particular, I think there are a couple of different categories that it potentially could play in.
Mhm.
I think one of the major categories that most healthcare organizations are looking at is data synthesis, data summarization. If
Okay.
you give Gen AI or AI a very complicated patient case, that normally in the old days with paper charts, it'd be like 5 volumes. Each volume is 2 inches thick, that kind of thing. The amount of time that the physician would take to go through that record and summarize that patient and not miss anything would be hours. And can you imagine a physician seeing a new patient that's that complicated? And there are quite a few patients that are very complicated,
Mhm.
and want to make sure that they don't miss anything, any tests, any recommendations from the past that were not done, things like that. Well, if you feed that to AI,
Yeah.
within 5 seconds, you have an entire
Yeah.
summary, no gaps, completely automated, with all the right priorities for the urgency of each condition. And I think that's something that's just one example that's going to really turn the tables. So
Mhm.
data synthesis is one area. And you can use it for, let's say, after visit summaries for patients when they go home. And by the way, Gen AI can tailor that after visit summary
Mhm.
to the patient's culture, age, language, where they live, their income, their reading level. It really is amazing. And for physicians, of course, they use it to send notes to patients to communicate. For instance, if I saw a patient who's Hispanic, I'm a Chinese doctor. What do I know about Hispanic culture? Very little, right? I don't learn that in
Yeah.
medical school.
Besides the food
So
intake.
when I, yeah, um, I learn when they tell me what I should be saying. So, but that was in the past. Today, I can send a summary to them that's at their reading level, understandable for a layperson. It can be couched in their culture, their terms. I tried that with after visit summary, for instance, with asthma for a teenage Hispanic patient.
Mhm.
So sort of theoretical, and it was able to generate an after visit summary that was customized and started with saying, "Hola, James." After visit summaries don't start like that usually. And they talked about salsa and chili setting off asthma, all kinds of stuff, home remedies that, is very common in Hispanic culture, all that kind of stuff where it's a whole new world of sort of extra medical and non-medical kinds of factors.
Mhm.
And Gen AI and AI can bring that right in. It can bring in all kinds of things like where you live. It can say, send a summary to a patient that says, oh, by the way, your medications change and it's now waiting for you at the Walgreens down the block at a discount, at your price discount. That's
Mhm.
the kind of thing where you could never do that before, without Gen AI. It would be very laborious, very resource intensive.
Mhm.
So data synthesis is also very important in research. And you're talking about research, literature that grows exponentially every year. No human can actually encompass the whole thing. So it's very useful to have a tool like AI to analyze it, to see what the validity of each study is, to sort of give recommendations,
Mhm.
and that's going to help a lot. AI is also going to be helping in research on drug development, where it's looking at molecular structures and creating candidates, which is starting to do in silico or in silicon, to give drug companies a much better yield. It's about 1 in 10. Every drug that goes into phase one, about 1 in 10 gets to the market, which means that drug has to pay for all the research done on the others. And that's why they're so expensive. So if you can increase your yield rate, and there's evidence that you can do with AI, all of a sudden, you have the possibility that you can bring in drugs that you never thought of. You can bring in drugs that are orphan drugs and modify them. You can do all kinds of things that in computing, in computer land, cyber land, and then you can have a much better chance of success when you go on. Of course, Gen AI and AI in general, there's a lot of other things they can do. I mentioned some of the patient and clinical practitioner experience kinds of things where, for instance, people are using AI for mental health counseling. And that's been very, very interesting, using chatbots, conversational AI. And it's been very helpful. And so people go, well, how good is it compared to a psychologist, let's say?
Mm-hmm.
But what if you don't have access to anything? What if you're in a rural community or an underserved community, you can't even get a hold of a psychologist, or psychiatrist? It's better than that. It's better than nothing. Right?
Exactly.
So it's a comparison standard, right? So AI will help us really improve a lot in certain areas. And then beyond that, it'll be fine-tuned into whether it's 80% accurate or 90% accurate or whatever. But it's a very exciting area. There's other things it can do that are also very exciting, like simulation. Gen AI can do very good simulation. So, for instance, you could simulate an angry patient or a patient that doesn't understand what you're saying. And it can actually play that role. So you can train you as a medical professional to learn the best way to deal with that. And I think that's very exciting. You can also simulate, based on data about your organization's performance, and what are the bottlenecks, what are the weak links, what are the risks, again, risk mitigation. And I think that's something that normally you would not be able to do that. Because AI can reach across different databases and different silos, you can actually get a comprehensive picture of what's going on. But it's going to be a while in some areas. For instance, clinical decision support, using AI to support your diagnosis and your therapy, it'll have to be an augmentation at this point. There's no data-based proven validity to what it recommends yet. And of course, one of the issues with AI, with Gen AI in particular, is hallucinations. So it's a little bit of a problem there. So I think eventually it'll happen because people are developing medical large language models and medical safeguards to make sure that it doesn't hallucinate and relies on citation-based literature, things like that. But it's going to take a while, because in medicine everything takes a long time, especially when it comes to patient safety.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of laws in place and regulation for a good reason, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, with the fine tuning, I think OpenAI just came out recently, and they have a different type of optimization flow, going through context and then through prompt engineering. So exciting stuff. Now you mentioned robotics, right? And I'm a futurist, so I can't wait for the day to where we have robots kind of just piecing us all together. Where do you see virtual headset, VR, augmentation, things like that kind of playing a role in healthcare in the next couple of years?
Well, it's interesting. One of my friends was one of the organizers of one of the few new medical schools in the country, the Kaiser Permanente Medical School in Pasadena. So I asked him, do you still have an anatomy course? I remember when I was a medical student, you'd have teams of 4 people around somebody who was generous enough to donate their body, a cadaver. And you'd be sort of dissecting out things and trying to identify little things and tissues and stuff. And he told me that they don't do that anymore. They use virtual bodies, which I think is very interesting. So, of course, initially that got a lot of pushback from the surgeons because they said, how can you learn on a virtual body?
Yeah.
And then the counter to that was, well, how many people actually need to know how to do surgery? It's very few people. So that passed, and they have these virtual bodies. Not only do you see it like a virtual body, you can actually sort of swim along the blood vessels, in microscopic size to look at how the blood flows. You could do all kinds of things you couldn't do in traditional anatomy.
Mhm.
So I think the virtual part, the virtual reality, XR, augmented reality, whatever, all those kinds of things are very useful for training.
Mhm.
And it could be useful for procedures where you can visualize, for instance, veins underneath the skin when you're doing a poke, a needle poke or something like that. A lot of possibilities to help the doctor and nurse be more accurate. So I think that's one thing. The other thing about robots, the big advance in robots is robotic surgery. That's been around for quite a while. There's a
Okay.
couple of companies that are doing that, and where you could have a surgeon operate on a patient, 300 miles away using a robot with local physicians attending,
Mhm.
but the expert is doing the surgery using something that magnifies the view, and you can really do very fine-grained surgery.
Mhm.
But beyond that, I know that there's research being done on nanobots, and I think that's more like sci-fi. So
Yeah.
you're talking about little nano robots that are floating around in your blood to fight cancer. I think that's pretty cool. So,
Yeah.
um, and in fact, I think the next frontier is not technology; it's actually biology. So now we've just got news that you can perhaps use immunotechniques to fight cancer,
Mhm.
and using viruses that have special receptors, things like that. So the innovation on that front is going to be tremendous, and it's going to tie in with technology. So I think the marriage of the two, technology plus biotech plus robotics plus 3D printing plus whatnot, I think there's going to be a sort of an exponential explosion in innovation. The question is, who's going to pay for it? That's sort of always the question, because
Yeah.
if there's a need for it, somebody's going to pay for it. That's going to drive the market, and I think that's a big question, because some of these areas, if they're not very profitable for companies, then it's going to be the federal government that has to pick up the tab to decide, is it worth it, to invest taxpayer money.
Mhm.
And it's not a bad thing. I mean, diseases are very common that are not commercially profitable.
Mhm.
Could benefit from that. It's just like the invention of the internet and GPS by DARPA. It's like one of
Yeah.
these things where no company would have done it, but it took an initial investment by our government that created the entire industry. So I think that's a very interesting debate, and I think the future is very bright. But for the commercial part, it's going to be slow. It's step by step, as people get comfortable with these new technologies. But I think the next 10 years are going to be very exciting.
Who do you see kind of leading the forefront with that? Those big companies. You haven't
I
seen.
think AI seems to be the one that's, the whole idea of AI and artificial intelligence, and being able to do sort of superhuman analytics, and prediction.
Mhm.
That seems to be grabbing a lot of the interest and the funding, in this, right now.
Mhm.
Um, the other industries, the other technologies are not nearly as mature or commercially ready,
Mhm.
and so it's going to take a little while. But the
Okay,
future is very bright.
that makes sense. How do you see healthcare organizing or organizations balancing the adoption of new technologies while ensuring data security and privacy?
Well, I think the data security is always an issue in healthcare, and so um, there's when they passed the HIPAA law, there were two parts to that law. One is privacy, but one is portability. Health information portability, HIPAA.
Mhm.
Portability means that you have to share data,
Okay.
because if you don't share data, it's not useful. So, on the
Exactly.
other hand, it has to be private, right? So you don't share it with people who are not supposed to have it.
Yeah.
So the government has been treading that fine line for 30 years, and they're finally getting uh, the consensus, the legislative consensus, and the executive consensus to drive data sharing in a secure manner. So now they have passed a couple of rules and regulations that force healthcare organizations, including both providers and payers, to
Mhm.
share information through the HL7 Fire API, which is an interface. an international interface. In fact, there are penalties if you don't share information. If a patient requests information, you're supposed to share something called electronic health information data set, which includes not just your medical data, all your medical data except for mental health, but also all the financial data that impinged on your care, that made your doctor decide on a certain procedure versus something else. And that's really interesting because now you can find out as a patient why my insurance plan paid for this and my neighbor's insurance plan paid for another thing, right?
Yeah.
And he has the same condition. So that kind of stuff is, the government is trying to bring transparency to the market. So what's happening is that you're balancing this data availability to the patient and to other organizations versus data privacy. And I think, this is a situation where people have come in with very unusual approaches to try to do both. For instance, in your area, in blockchain, there's startups that have tried to do a blockchain-based health data market where patients can monetize their information and give approval or disapproval to whoever wants to access information. Very useful for research, right?
Yeah.
So when you have clinical researchers who want information, it's very expensive to try to recruit patients. But if there were a national registry that was easily accessible, you could match patients to a study and pay them, which they normally do. It would save a lot of time to market, for their drugs. And I think that's something that's really important. But I think that the privacy issue is always going to be there. So there's a lot of people using Gen AI and AI to hack health data. I heard that a driver's license, a stolen driver's license, only is about $6 in the black market, but health data is about $250, on the black market, maybe higher.
Yeah.
And the reason is because when you steal healthcare data from, let's say, a hospital, that data is very time sensitive. You need it back as soon as you can because you have patients that need that data, that are waiting for the data to be able to be treated or to be able to be operated on. So that urgency gives the hacker a huge advantage to demand, and hospitals almost always pay it. There's no choice. Whereas a driver's license, you could invalidate, you could get a new one, things like that. So
easily. It's literally a life or death scenario.
Exactly. And that's what the hacker's counting on, and they've been successful. So I think there's there has to be, and there are people trying to keep pace, with the pace of AI, because with AI, you could have phishing attempts that look super real. They don't have the grammatical mistakes anymore. They don't come from weird places. I mean, you could have things that could look totally, you could just go right by you, and look like it came from your CEO or something. So I think it's really, they need new tools, advanced tools to fight that and to protect your data.
Kind of fight fire with fire.
Yeah, or even go beyond that. I mean, I'm sure there are people developing sort of AI observers, of AI of transactions that can recognize patterns that are red flags, I would say. And I think, so the question is, what could solve that issue once and for all? Could there be like a blockchain-based or unduplicable kind of ID that you could, postulate as your authentication method? I think those kind of things are, going to require a lot of research, but there has to be something to make it secure. Otherwise, it always is going to limit the sharing of data that's so important.
Yeah, we're always going to run into that risk. And how do you expect, what strategies would you recommend for healthcare organizations looking to develop and implement effective digital transformation initiatives?
Well, I think there's two levels. What we've seen in our company, because we work with software technology, it's a platform for automation and intelligent automation. What we find is that, first of all, healthcare organizations have very small budgets for technology. Their IT spend is only like 1% of their operating budget. So it's very, very small. I mean, it's tiny. At the most, enlightened organizations might spend 3 to 4%, or academic centers. But their main problem today, one of the main problems is labor shortage of physicians, shortage of nurses. So the tech addresses that because it does automation, right? It removes a lot of the manual tasks away from healthcare. So when you have a pain point like that and a solution like that, then it's easier to, to describe the value of that automation and the return on investment. So on a tactical scale, if you look at problems and there are a lot of problems, the supply chain, there's unexpected disruptions, there's all kinds of things in healthcare, and try to figure out for any given organization, what are the top 2 or 3, then you have a good clue as to whether your tech is going to be viewed, as a feasible solution to anything at its price. And I think that's the tactical level. But there's also a strategic level, which is with COVID, like I mentioned, it really drove a lot of higher level concern, higher level thinking about the future. And so you see a lot of our healthcare organizations saying they want to do digital transformation, whatever that means. And so digital transformation means you want to make everything digital and sort of go into transition from 19th century healthcare processes to 21st century healthcare processes. Yeah. And it's a long process. I mean, we've gone through some migrations and stuff, and it's always painful because you have a lot of legacy systems. Healthcare systems have hundreds of legacy systems that often you don't even know how to write the code for anymore. So it has these systems, and then you bring a new technology. How do you transition the data? How do you verify the data? What data can be dumped or has to be kept, by law and things like that. A lot of issues with interoperability. And so we're finding that we're doing a lot more automation with APIs. So we use APIs for transitioning data. And I think in the future, APIs will be the key to interoperability, especially using a common format like HL7 FHIR, which the government is pushing. Okay. So introducing things, you want to reduce the friction. So the question is, what do the strategic folks, the CEO, the COO, and so on, CIO, what are they thinking about? And the answer today is that no one knows. No one knows what's going to happen. It's more uncertainty now than it's ever been. So the question is not like not what are you going to do about it, because you don't know what to do. Is how do you position your organization so that it's able to be agile, right? Able to be resilient, able to adapt and to move and to pivot. And that's something that healthcare organizations just don't do very well. It takes a different kind of mindset, where, for instance, just with the people, you have a shortage of people. What are you training the people to do? If you train them on the same jobs, very paper intensive and stuff, well, the next time the demand shoots up again, like with COVID, you're not going to be able to find enough people, right? They're going to burn out, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you change their jobs? Upskill them. How do you change their jobs so that no matter what the demand is for that dimension of disruption, you at least have a chance. You have a chance to expand and contract as you need to. So whatever you can do by automation, that will help.
And I would think
those kind of, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would think something that important as healthcare would need to be, because we don't know when the next coronavirus or any type of virus would be.
Right.
So,
yeah.
What were you saying?
I mean, COVID's still going on. Yeah, COVID is still going on, and it's going up again. So it's like people are being so blasé, but it's going up again, and so is RSV and flu and everything else. So, in fact, just last month I've seen 3 or 4 friends get COVID, long COVID again, and so it's kind of concerning because some of these people have gotten it twice already, and so it's going to be with us long term. So then the question is, with this kind of demand fluctuation, how do healthcare organizations not only respond in a way that can handle the demand, handle the financial issues, handle the kind of coordination we had to have during the pandemic, with other organizations and share data, all these kinds of issues. And supply chain is a big one, right? Supply chain was a huge weakness during COVID. Because of a perfect storm of where the drugs came from, China, and everybody wants it. Everybody wants face masks. Everybody wants isolation rooms and things like that. You just didn't have that many. Those kind of disruptions, some of them are structural, so you had people moving to tents in the parking lot, or moving to the nearest hotel in quote isolation rooms. That shows you how structured and hardwired healthcare is. It's not that flexible. So things that are scalable and flexible, for instance, are telemedicine. That's much more scalable, where you don't have them come in, but they're being treated at home. And with new technologies, you could even examine them at home. And so that kind of stuff, in fact, you could have an avatar examine them at home. That would be totally scalable. So I don't know if they would go for it, but that would go. If patients would really, you can imagine, today there are avatars that resemble your doctor, that could be very realistic, could sense your emotions, could sense your hesitancy, things like that. Who knows where it will be in 10 years? Maybe something like that where people prefer, like with ATMs, at the bank, they prefer robots to doctors. There was a recent study that showed that Dr. Chatbot was actually much more polite and had better bedside manners than real doctors. And so, yeah.
Imagine having, I'm sure you're familiar with the Tesla bot, the humanoid bot. Imagine having Tesla kind of fine-tuned to be a doctor whenever you want to be a doctor, or fold your laundry, take the dog out.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine in the modern generation, the young people, maybe they would be okay with the bot. The older generation definitely wants the in-person, most of them want the in-person relationship. Yeah. Because they know that the other human is an advocate for them, no matter what they're doing, they're an advocate. Whereas the bot, you really don't know what their agenda is. It's like today, on social media, you don't really know who is who, like what is their agenda. You don't know them. And so, but on the other hand, the trade-off is that this, quote, doctor that you have access to may have access to the entire medical literature. Mm-hmm. And they could have access to all the resources that your human doctor may not know about. Mm-hmm. And they are updated on the latest literature. Exactly. In fact, there have been some studies that show that diagnosis is actually giving way to AI. That is, AI is doing a better job. There was one story, anecdotal story, where this person had for a couple of years been plagued by a series of symptoms that nobody could diagnose, multiple doctors, specialists, and so on. He entered all his symptoms into, Gen AI, and it came out with the right diagnosis. And he brought that into the doctor and then checked it out. Sure enough, that's what he had. So it's the kind of thing where, humans cannot know everything. It's just not possible to know, especially when you don't see it very often. So having the AI as an assistant, right? An assistant, not the main decider, but as an assistant, is very useful. And doctors with AI are going to do better than doctors without AI. On the other hand, there was a study that showed that a doctor plus AI is better than a doctor or AI. So that means that there's some role that the doctor plays. For instance, doctors still have much more gestalt, so much more sense of the patient than AI does. Maybe it'll change in the future, but that's what you hear doctors talking about. They have a feeling in their gut that this patient is sicker than it seems, right? Yeah. Something about the patient, the way they're sitting, the way they're talking, whatever. This sort of instinctual sense is actually a compilation of all the experience they've had, that doctor has over years of practice. And that's something that AI doesn't have yet, because it's not documented, right? It's not in data. Yeah. So the more data we collect, the more possible that the AI will be able to come up to that. But we'll see.
Quality data at that too.
Quality, yeah. Quality data. Some data that's sort of understandable in computer terms, discrete data, things like that. Yeah.
Amazing. Now you have the automation, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have the ultra fast network storage technology. Can you talk me through those roles and kind of what you do there?
Yeah, actually, that was a while back. That was one of the startups I was in. So we're not doing that anymore. That was a solid state based network storage. That was way in years ago. Now it's very common. So, but that startup didn't go anywhere. So the startup that did get that did get funding and got acquired was a startup I co-founded with 3 other people, and it was a startup on natural language processing analytics. So the idea is you can look for medical records, which you're doing today with Gen AI, and understand where the quality gaps are, where you left money on the table because you didn't make a medical claim on a certain disease, things like that. And that's obviously of great interest to providers and to payers. So again, I think in the future, if people are wondering what to do in medicine, where to head your career, as a doctor, as a nurse, especially if you want to deviate off the traditional path, which is getting more and more cloudy, is that if you focus on data, I think data is a good compass, that data is going to be exploding even more in the future. And anything around data, cybersecurity, analytics, predictive analytics, AI, that's going to have legs. You're going to be able to build your career on that. The other part is automation. I think healthcare has to be automated. Whether it's our platform or somebody else's, healthcare is not sustainable. Not if every time you have a surge in demand, you have to hire a lot more people. That's not scalable, especially in a crisis. So, yeah.
Amazing. I think I read I think it was from McKinsey. Yeah, I read an article by McKinsey, and it said organizations that have humans plus AI perform better. You mentioned doctors performing better with AI. So you're in charge of automation right now, your current organization. What can companies do? What do you use kind of the process to automate these companies?
Yeah, so I'm actually leading the healthcare vertical at Automation Anywhere. So I'm one of a couple of people doing industry leadership, and my role is thought leadership. But basically, what it means is that usually somebody comes to us, a healthcare organization, where they don't have enough people, or they have a huge backlog in medical claims that they can't get to because they don't have enough people, or they have a lot of prior authorizations for procedures that they can't get through. All these things require people to do mundane, repetitive tasks and rules-based tasks. If this, do that, So you think about medical personnel, you don't want to hire expensive people to do that. You really want a machine to do that. And so they come to us and we say, okay, first step is, do you know what you're doing? So self-awareness, and we have a tool for helping to discover what the process is. But a lot of times you have a department of 10 people, they're all doing it a little differently. And some guy's going to be able to do it in 2 minutes. Somebody else is going to do it in 10 minutes, right? And the guy who's doing it in 2 minutes is using an extra step of going outside to the web that is not documented. Right? So that kind of thing, you have a lot of variability, but generally we want people to be able to define what the process is. And then we have to look at the process. And for the first 2 or 3 they automate, you don't want to pick the ideal end to end because it's going to take forever and everybody's going to, time out. You want to pick something simple and small that you can learn from, learn what the technology can do and what it cannot do. And so you get something small. And also when you do that, you can measure it, you can do the metrics, and then you come up with a return, ROI. That ROI is critical because you use that to present to your CFO and said, this is our justification for doing more automations. Please give us some more budget. And then it goes on from there. And all the time, the organization is learning. They're either learning to do it themselves or learning how to work with a partner to do it. And so you're putting this platform in place. And our technology is actually a platform. It's like Microsoft Office. So it's not for a single solution. It's a tool you can use for many, many automations. So you have a tool like that, and you think about it, automation, what role does it play in your technology stack, in healthcare? Well, it's probably a fundamental component. If you think about redesigning healthcare, automation has to be in there, because otherwise you're going to be using people very expensive and burned out people, very angry people. And so you put automation in there. And then the role of the automation is not just to automate things that existing applications cannot or do not, but to move data between applications that don't know how to do that, or that are unfriendly to each other. So it's kind of like an Uber layer, like a glue between systems. It gives you a view of the entire organization. You can reach into different systems, supply chain, accounting, rev cycle, all this kind of things, and give you a much more realistic view of how your healthcare organization is doing and what the risks are. Again, the risks. And I think that's the sort of the position we're finding ourselves in as people think about strategically about automation. And I think it's a good thing. I mean, you think about just one area for cybersecurity, people are using AI to attack healthcare systems every day. Every day there's a big breach.
It's terrible.
How can you have people doing that, watching all the time? You can't. You have to automate it. And how do you automate it? You have to automate it with the same tool, AI, to look at these patents and see what is suspicious, because these, some kind of attempt is going to come in that's going to have a signature nobody's ever seen, and you're not going to be able to pick it up. And so you need to identify the patent. So that's just cybersecurity. That's the part of the infrastructure is really key. And you just can't hire more people. You have to handle it in some way that can scale. Labor, the use of labor, keeping people happy so they're practicing, as we say, at the top of their license and not at the bottom of their license, and not doing stuff that a high schooler could do. That you don't want to do that. They're doing stuff that they're needed for, and then you want automation to increase your standard of quality, care quality. Some organizations are having problems with quality scores, federal quality scores, CMS quality scores. And to improve those, you can actually put in automation so that you can standardize the way you treat people, right? Standardize the way you treat people to the quality score, so you're not biased. You're not, treating some people different than other people. You're using best practices. All that can be automated so that you can make sure that your quality is met, your quality criteria. And there are dozens of them. And that makes a difference in terms of your Medicare reimbursement. Your low quality, you get penalized. So that really affects your bottom line. So all these areas, you just think of what it takes to comply or to improve quality or to even know what's going on. You have to automate because there's not enough people to do it. And you don't want to have a lot of people being hired just to do things. So
yeah. Exactly. It gets labor intensive, expensive. And when when thinking of terms of systems thinking, you want to have a whole overview of what's going on from every point in the organization. Data, labor, accounting, finance, whatever it is, to make a decisive, data-driven decision.
Right.
With that being said, can you share examples of how analytics have been used to optimize clinical workflows and improve patient care?
Yeah. So when I used to be at Kaiser and seeing hundreds of startups, there was one interesting startup, and this is just and I believe they're still around, where they would take data analytics, analyze the operating room schedule and the prospective surgeries coming up, and then they would use proprietary technology to reschedule people so they would optimize the surgery because in a hospital, the operating room is the biggest revenue generator.
Yeah.
The more procedures you can do, the better off the hospital is. So these guys, actually in the San Francisco area, they went to a local community hospital and they put their technology into play. And literally, this technology was invented by rocket scientists and it was kept secret, trade secret. So they never patented it. Nobody knows what it does. Yeah. And it's actually a very challenging math problem because it's queuing theory. It's very... In fact, at one point, there was $1 million math prize offered by some outfit in Boston to solve this issue. So when you have humans doing this, like scheduling nurses, scheduling doctors, it's not easy. So what they managed to do is they managed to free up an extra hour per operating room for that hospital. And that's huge, right? Because every procedure is another couple $1,000s. So that was a huge win. However, it met with a lot of resistance because now the surgeons had no coffee breaks. If you think about it,
Yeah.
They had to work, had to go directly. No, take a breath. You have to go from one to the next.
How
So,
stress and they.
so yeah, you can optimize it, but you can optimize it to a point where it's diminishing returns. They'll burn out. They'll retire, and then you have more problems. So optimization depends on very wise leaders. So if you want to optimize, the first thing you should do is make sure that your staff has a much better professional experience, right? Because it's very expensive if they leave and you have to hire contract staff, which is what's happening today. It can balloon your expenses incredibly high, so you can't, it's not a good way to run your hospital. So there are other things. For instance, I mentioned Gen AI now being used in the clinical side. Automation on the clinical side is usually used only when it's very little perceived risk. Like you're automating, let's say, reminders to patients about upcoming appointments, right? That's really low risk, really pretty low risk. If you didn't send that alert out, who cares, right? The patient may miss the appointment, but you can't use it for a diagnosis, because that's serious, that's high risk. You can use it to support your decision, but you can't use it alone to make a diagnosis. You can't use it to treat a patient. And actually, treating a patient is a lot harder than diagnosing a patient. Treating a patient means you have to understand their home situation, their finances, their location, their support network, all these kind of things that you may not know about, right? So, example, if you have a patient who finds it very difficult to come into the hospital or come to the pharmacy to get their medicines, maybe you want to give them an intramuscular injection and not an oral medication, because an intramuscular will last a month, right? So they don't have to come in, that kind of thing. So automation and AI in the clinical space has been relegated to the very low risk kinds of things. But with Gen AI, now people are really saying we should use AI in real clinical high risk situations. Because if you think about it, for instance, one of the things that you use AI for, you walk into an ICU, right, as an attending physician in the morning. And then in the old days, you have paper charts. You have a whole stack of paper charts. So you go from alphabetical or bed number, right? You just go from top to the bottom. What often happens, you get to the last patient, and that was a patient that was the sickest. You should have gone to that patient first, right? By that time, it's afternoon. And so you've lost time. So what AI can do, in fact, some startups have tried to do this in the past, is to analyze all the lab data, all the note-taking data, all the stuff about the patient, the nursing notes for that night, for the 24 hours, and assign them an acuity score, a danger score, essentially. Who's sicker, right? And that's been very helpful, because now you go to the sickest patients first. You get their stuff done first because it's more important. And that's something that not only is better for care, but it makes the physician a lot more productive. They don't waste their time going through things that are very mundane, right? Oh, this patient needs a refill of this or that, whatever. They go to the patient who's deteriorating, the patient that just came in, or the patient that's having a complication, and they deal with that first. When everybody's still in the hospital, they can get the specialist over, not in the middle of the afternoon, but in the morning, right, when somebody's available. All those things are very critical for management of an ICU or even a ward of patients. And so that could be useful not just for physicians, it could be useful for nurses. When nurses sign out to the next shift of nurses, they can say, here's a list and summary of every patient, and these are the sickest. These ones you got to look at first. And so you can, that's sort of the next gen medicine. It's the kind of thing where AI and data analytics will actually help us give better care beyond our abilities, right? Beyond our ability to look through the data, and machines can do that, fairly readily. So very exciting.
So yeah, seeing things that usually go unnoticed and things we can't usually
Right.
see. So what's something that's piqued your interest that you're working on or that you kind of studied or found that you're just like, wow, I can't believe this happened.
There's a lot of things. I mean, somebody did a survey of consumers, healthcare consumers, and I think a couple of thousand of them, and 81% of them said that by the year 2030, if one of your organs is failing, you just go down to the lab and have them 3D bioprint you a new one. So that's, this by 2050, right? Not 2030, 2050. 81% of people feel that, believe that will happen.
Mhm.
And actually, it's not far off. I mean, let's say you can replace your liver, right? You can bioprint yourself a new liver. It changes medicine because now, what do you care about drinking, right? You can drink as much as you want. It's not good for you, but a lot of people use that as an excuse. Like, I can just get a new liver. I'll have to save for it. Right. New kidney, new liver, a new heart valve. It's crazy, right? So that's going to totally change medicine because it's like, it gives you another option that it's almost like becoming the cyber person. You can replace your organs, your tissues. You can maybe have tech-enabled enhancements to your body, human 2.0, things like that.
Yeah.
It's really a little bit creepy, right? A little bit creepy, but a lot creepy.
So what do you know what kind of material they'll be using for that, or is it kind of
They don't know. I mean, there's been I have a friend who actually does conferences for 3D bioprinting. I'm sure that a lot of those issues about immune response, to those materials, things like that, have been worked on. So, but yeah, so it's very interesting right now. I mean, the other area I've seen recently is some research on nanobots.
Yeah, you mentioned
Tiny robots that go. Yeah, I mentioned that they go through your bloodstream. They're somehow remotely controllable, or they've been programmed to change shape and to deliver medicines and to do all these kind of things. That's just sci-fi, right? That's just it's amazing. It's like an old movie called A Fantastic Voyage. Yeah.
There's this quote that says, "Are we replicating movies, or movies replicating?" So this section
The movies can't. They can't keep up. Movies can't keep up.
Can't keep up with reality, which is,
I mean,
weird.
yeah. I mean, and so it brings up a deeper issue, which is, what is the value of a human being? What are we supposed to do, right? If everything's automated, everything's AI, where do we add value? Even creatives, people who create art. AI is doing that now. They're creating videos and art and images that are beautiful, and so the question is, what's our value? And I think you have to think pretty hard about that, because maybe our value is being the true creators, the people that create on the edge, right? That because AI is based on data, and so when you ask it for an image, it quote creates an image, but it's based on previous images that it's seen, that it puts together. True creativity is creating something that never existed in any shape, and that's something that maybe humans have to do that, but maybe AI will do that one day. Who knows, right? So that's one thing. True creativity, empathy. You could fake empathy with AI. You could fake empathy. Problem solving, using large experience. That's still pretty much human. Solving problems, being creative, being critical and able to understand multiple alternatives and the value of each. That gets back to a little bit of the gut feel thing. So, but it's a good discussion, because some of the things that people are doing today will not exist in 10 years, just like a telephone operator. They don't exist anymore. So
Phones, the ones you need to
yeah,
call.
I remember those days.
Yes.
Cell phones were like this big, like briefcases.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where, so where can we go with people? What should they be learning in college today? Are they really, medical school? What are they learning?
Yeah, I think it's not even a trend. I wouldn't even call it a trend. It's just more kids around my age, or kids in high school, trying to figure out, like, why would I go to school? Why would I go to college?
Yeah.
Why not just become a YouTube creator and
Yeah.
that or something, or more recently TikTok. So yeah, but hopefully we don't have too many people with existential crises.
Well, I think there's a lot of my daughter is graduated from college a few years ago, and she said in her classmates with COVID and stuff, there's a lot of confusion. Like there's a lot of uncertainty, which leads to a lot of stress because all these high achievers are going towards careers, and now it looks like things are changing. Like the promise they were given
Mhm.
may not be fulfilled, and
Yeah.
so jobs are not there, and the requirements are different there and in those days remote work so that you didn't socialize with people, things like that.
Yeah.
So
It's
a lot
moving
of
too fast.
uncertainty, a lot of stress. Yeah. And I think obviously at some point we'll get a better, hopefully the younger generation will get a better sense of direction and purpose.
Mhm.
But right now it's very, again, a lot of uncertainty. A lot of
Yeah.
uncertainty.
Yeah. Wow. Very informative, man. We're nearing our end here. And honestly, every time we hop on a conversation, I just learn more and more and more. Obviously, not me being in healthcare, but it's just amazing having this conversation with you.
Yeah, it's an interesting time right now in a lot of industries.
Mhm.
And healthcare is just one, but the healthcare is especially interesting because it's been stuck in a rut, for many years,
Mhm.
and until it came to COVID and to Gen AI, and now it's really moving pretty fast for what it's done in the past. And so it's a good area to focus on. It's such a
Mhm.
big part of the economy, but you look at agriculture and energy and finance; all those things are changing as well. So it's a very rich spectrum of issues to look at and to try to figure out. And it's not. I don't envy the federal regulators who have to deal with this. It's a changing picture all the time,
Yeah.
and they're just trying to keep up. The lawyers are trying to keep up. The privacy folks, the cybersecurity people.
Mhm.
So, is there an AI to help us be faster to do that? That's a good question, right? To keep up with the pace. Who knows?
What do you suggest for those kids out there, people that are going to school for nursing
Mhm.
or getting their doctors?
I think for now, those professions are pretty safe. There's still a demand. Like I said, there's a labor shortage right now.
Mhm.
So pay is good and the job is pretty much, jobs are out there.
Mhm.
But I would say they should look two steps ahead. If they're counting on practicing 30, 40 years and then retiring,
Yeah.
that job is going to look very different in 10 years. So what they should do is keep an eye on data, and on AI, and try to gain skills in those areas so that they'll continue to be valuable and contributing to society, right? They need to understand those areas. And you think about medical training, there's so much to learn that they almost never have room to put in things like business or AI or anything else to learn. Yet I think the future is where instead of doing things yourself, you will use AI to do things. You have to manage a tool to do it.
Mhm.
And that's a skill that I'm sure we'll start to see that in the curriculum soon. I mean, for a lot of these training programs. But I would advise people to just think ahead about, first of all, what do you want to do, right? What really turns you on? What's the area? Do you like to talk to people? Or you like to sort of hide away by yourself and think about things? And so in the old days, you say, "Oh, that's a pathologist,"
Yeah.
versus a family practitioner, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But today it's very different because you have all kinds of options. You can do remote work, you can do telemedicine, you can do all kinds of things. So thinking about what you really want to do, what turns you on, what really gives you satisfaction about your job, and then try to figure out where the tech is going and trying to fit yourself. Like I said, data, you can't go wrong. If you can learn about data, take some courses on, Coursera or something like that about data and get certified, you're just going to increase your job value. And then if you want to look at future, longer term, things like 3D bioprinting, nanobots, VR, AR, those kind of things,
Mhm.
much longer term. But, if you're interested, there might be a good way to start a company or something, and get into that area. Other things, there's the business side, things like interoperability, like I mentioned, are big areas in healthcare. Very good opportunity for folks that don't necessarily want to see the glitziest technology, but they want to do something that's of value, great value.
Mhm.
Interoperability with data is going to be a huge area in the coming years. Federal mandates and stuff, data transparency, into different databases, those kind of things. Um, so there's a lot of areas, and it's always going to change. Like I said, it's uncertain right now. So a lot of changes. Just have to keep your eye out, and so be aware of where things are going, and kind of go. Like my next position, does it go towards where I want to do or not? And so sometimes you don't have a choice, but if you always think like that, then when that position becomes available, you'll have the right credentials to be hired. That's sort of what happened to me. I didn't plan it, so
Yeah.
there's no way to plan it. So
All the serendipity and
yeah, yeah. And, put yourself out there. I mean, even if you're an introvert, one of the ways that you get known for what you want to do is put yourself out, in LinkedIn, go to meetups, things like that
Mhm.
with people in the same field who are interested in what you're interested in.
Mhm.
And you will find those opportunities, but they don't pop up on job boards, those kind of the interesting things don't pop up on job boards. They're all word of mouth, usually.
You got to build your personal brand.
Yeah, you build your brand, or it's not so much build your brand as let people know, that what you're interested in, and build a relationship so they trust you enough to recommend you, when those positions come along, and that takes time, So yeah,
Awesome.
it takes effort. It takes
Yeah.
effort.
Anything worthwhile takes effort.
Yeah.
But yeah, as we wrap up another lighting episode with Dr. Chow, I want to extend my gratitude to our listeners and brilliant minds shaping the future. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe for more. Stay connected and stay inspired. Stay tuned for our next episode where we continue our journey at the intersection of technology and innovation. Until then, this is Matthew Smith signing off from Cortex Labs. Keep innovating. Peace out, guys.
Great. Matthew, you